Hello, everyone. This is your host, Manoj Tandon. Welcome to another episode of Dark Rhino Security Confidential. Please hit the like and subscribe button so that we can get a little bit of love, and not just from you, but from the algorithms. They're kind of important. But today we are honored to welcome back a Security Confidential alumni, Mr. Alex Sharp. And for those of you guys who missed the last episode, you must go and listen to it. We'll put the links in. You know, he has been in the industry since the 1980s. He's worked in the federal government with multiple three-letter agencies. He's a board member. He's a cybersecurity practitioner. He's a speaker, an author, and he's an adjunct professor when he gets the time. I don't know how he does it, but he does. He's done 2 startups. He's a thought leader in cybersecurity and risk management. We're glad to have him back. Alex, welcome back.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me. I really enjoy these discussions. This is really pretty cool. Thank you.
I'm looking forward to it because we got into some pretty interesting things last time, and
yes, we did.
And I wanna kind of pick this up where we left it. So to begin with, the last part we talked about was the ISACA conference that you were attending. Do you want to? How did that go? And any interesting notes that you picked up from there?
Oh man, I ended up talking to people at the conference, and I ended up talking to a reporter about this, and also one of the bloggers, because cyber has become important. It's a business conversation. People have money to spend. So you have a lot of people gravitating towards it, right? Because it's kind of like, when young kids like in grammar school start playing soccer, you got magnet ball, right? You can tell where the ball is because there's this pile of kids moving throughout the field. They're not playing the positions. So cyber has become kind of like magnet ball, right? There's money, there's interest, there's fame, there's fortune. So everybody's diving on it, whether they have the qualifications to be in the space or not, right? So they're diving on it. And I think there's a couple of reasons why it resonated with me. So first and foremost, I have seen too many imposters over the years, not in just cyber, but in other fields, do some real damage because they can be very compelling. Their recommendations sound good, but at the end of the day, somebody or some business ends up getting hurt when they shouldn't have. Another reason this is top of mind is I'm doing a lot of work these days around artificial intelligence, mostly working with large organizations to understand how to reap the rewards, but at the same time manage the risk. About 18 months, 2 years ago, I was on a call that included the head of AI research for one of the think tanks. I sat on an industry group and we were trying to figure out how to categorize AI risk, which is a challenge in itself. Not so much because we don't know what it is, but that there is no established framework, right? So 20 people could be talking about the same thing and use 30 different terms. So what they said is the number one risk was the only thing growing faster than the number of AI adoption was the number of long-term AI experts. And he was absolutely right. It was absolutely right, because we're seeing a lot of bad advice, a lot of bad counsel. We're seeing a lot of issues coming from folks that are just not qualified, providing advice. And unfortunately, a huge percentage in the cyber and AI space know they're not qualified and don't seem to care, right? Which is a problem. We also see a lot of folks, you can tell when something's written by ChatGPT or one of the other tools. You get a sense. There's a fair amount of advisory work being done now by putting it into the tool.
Yes. And it gets back to then, how do we prepare folks, for tomorrow, because we are so geared. I mean, everything we do, whether it's tech school, college, you name it, or I should say the individual psychology, the way it's structured today, it's about show me how to do something, and I'm going to do that again and again and again, and I'll do it really well, you know. And this spans the gamut, whether you're a worker or you're a radiologist, doesn't matter. Your training paths might be extremely different, but in at the end, to oversimplify, you are being taught how to do something, and you just repeat it again and again. And as you're saying, if the why is not focused on, that person may not be valuable anymore.
Those are all true statements, but I would argue that we've been dealing with that as humans for somewhere between 200,000 and 300,000 years.
Not at this pace.
That is absolutely true. That is absolutely true. We are innovating and changing at a much more rapid pace than we've ever seen. Let me kind of build out where I'm going and where I think things have changed. I wish I had a prophetic response that would kind of unlock the answer, but we're not there yet. So let's go back to a couple 100,000 years ago when we were in caves. There came a point where the most valuable person in the cave was the one that could start a fire.
Yeah.
Right? They had the skills.
Yes.
That was not a commodity. But what happened? Over time, the information became, more populated. We found different ways of doing it. Today, we don't give it a thought, right? We turn a knob on a stove, we hit a button, we flick a lighter, we hit a switch that gives us light. We have automatic thermostats that heat our houses. We have all this stuff. Now, what really happened from a technology standpoint? We transferred the work from the human to the machine.
Correct.
Right? And sometimes, we get stuck on the term machine, but a piece of steel running against a piece of flint to cause spark and create a fire is actually technology.
Yes,
Right?
it
Stone
is.
tools and animal claws are actually technology
Yes.
in the broader sense. So what we see happening with AI today and any other technology over hundreds of years is that the work never goes away. It transfers to the technology, and the human is freed up to do more innovative, more strategic, more innovative kind of let's go to the next level kinds of things. We've seen this
Agreed.
pattern play out for hundreds of years. So what's changed? Number one thing that's changed is when we're dealing with AI for the first time ever, the work that's been transferred and the work that is no longer done by the human is white collar worker jobs. Right?
Yes.
It's knowledge workers, people that needs applications and data, which sounds more IT-ish, but from an economist standpoint, it means anything. Right? So it's the white collar folks, the highly educated folks that are being the most disrupted. That we've never dealt with. One thing we do know, and a little piece of cute trivia, one thing that we do know is whenever we go through these transitions, people scream and complain
Sure they do.
that jobs are going away. I don't like this, and transitions are not good. And there's always pockets that have a little bit of a problem. But the reality is, 1776, when the U.S. was formed, we had roughly 4 million people or 4 million Europeans. I've actually seen numbers that we say that we had more bison in North America than we did indigenous and Europeans. Today we have 335 million. We've had lots of technology, we've had lots of job disruption. but our unemployment rate is so low. So the historical proof is we end up actually creating more jobs and we end up creating more demand, even though we go through these little transitions. And the
Now that
nature of the work changes. So no matter how we look at it, this stuff tends to work out in the long run. The big question is, what's it going to look like? Because we have no analogy on a large scale for the white collar worker. And by the way, you know the word sabotage?
yeah,
Supposedly, the derivation of it, and I've seen conflicting sources of this, is that in Japan, when I think it was um, some factory workers were being replaced by machines, they took their wooden shoes called sabots and they
okay.
threw them into the machines to dismantle the machines. That's what they sabotaged. They sabotaged the machines.
I didn't know that.
I've seen some references that say that is an urban legend. I've seen other ones that say it's absolutely true. Either way, it's a memorable example. I think it's kind of cool, but it makes perfect sense.
It does, and it's good to use at a cocktail party, which I'm going to do.
You should. You should. That would be very nice.
I did not know. I didn't know that. That's
Uh,
that's very cool.
Let me give you one other thought.
Please.
I don't want to miss this. We talked about education. We talked about why. We talked about how. We talked about this. At the end of the day, the very best investment any of us can make is in ourselves. That's the absolute best investment. And the younger you are, the more investments you can make, the more you can try, the more you can explore. There's absolutely no reason not to, right? Even if you try something and you don't like it, try something else,
Yeah.
right? Knowledge and experience never goes away. It may need to be refreshed, it may need to lose its value, but it always builds upon itself and creates new options and new avenues. So even if you're using AI, because you got some people that are using it to kind of play the system, you have others that are using it to explore. So, like a software developer who says, you know what, I got 15 tasks to do in developing this program. This trivial procedural stuff here, this common stuff, let me use AI to go find that while I take a hard look at these really creative, novel problems that haven't been solved before. That
I
is a fantastic use of the tools
yes, it is.
because you're going to the next level, you're innovating, you're creating, you're exploring. You're making the
You're
world.
using your mind at that point to create a novel outcome, and
Yep.
that's at the heart of this.
Yes, it
Is that
is.
that's going to be the transition that people are going to have to make is, you're just not a cog in the wheel. There's not that many. The cogs are robots.
Yep.
In in fact, Alex, I think last time you had mentioned Oxford University had done a study
Oh, yeah.
there. What were the most likely jobs disrupted? And you had mentioned roofers and nailers and that. And one of the things that's interesting just today, Zero Hedge, if you go on Zero Hedge, there's an article about how countries like Japan and South Korea are heavily investing in robotics,
Yep.
humanoid replacements for those mundane tasks.
Yep.
So, for anybody that was old enough to remember the Jetsons and that robot that cleaned the house, you know what? Maybe that's not such a fetched fantasy.
Betty?
Betty, yeah. I was going to say Judy, but Judy was the wife. It's Betty.
I thought Judy, or was Judy the daughter? It
The
doesn't matter.
daughter. I can't remember. It's been a while since I seen that show.
Oh,
And I'm dating
his wife was Jane.
Jane.
I'll tell you why I remember that. There's a group of us that does like a yearly panel and we
Is
tend to
this the
pick.
Johns Hopkins panel?
Yes, I didn't
This
want
is
to
the one
mention.
that you did the Hitchhiker's Guide this past time.
We recently did Hitchhiker's Guide, but one of the years we did George Jetson's birthday,
Okay.
and we talked about, um, is the future going to be more like George Jetson with flying cars and AI embedded, or is it going to be more like Star Wars, or is it going to be more like the Terminator? Right. So George Jetson is on my mind.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of the Terminator thing is very dystopian, but I think I can, everything in science fiction or fiction is the beginning point of invention in something, and we're getting there. We're
It,
getting there, and what Zero Hedge was saying was just that humanoid robots. It's not something that's a thing of the year 2500. Heavy investments are being made now in technologies and with the compute power that we have to actually imagine machines taking over the mundane.
which is human history.
Hmm.
That's what we have done, going back to the days of stone tools and animal skins, automobiles,
Now,
electricity, right? We can go right down the list. This is just a different one. I would argue it's more dangerous than a lot of other things,
because
right?
of the pace, yeah, it's happening so quickly, and that genie is out of the bottle. It's not going back in.
Yep. And also the breath and the ability to be misused. Because you think about it, let's go back to the days in the cave where everybody's starting to figure out how to create fire. All right, fire goes wrong. You're in a cave. It's rock, it's stone. All right, might get smoky. Some people might suffocate. You might burn some stuff, but that's very different than having an AI model that can provide the instructions for a terrorist to create a nuclear weapon.
You don't need a nuclear weapon for that.
No, but it was the only example I came up with off the top of my head.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good one. It'll shortcut it, but a lot of that stuff, if you're willing to look, is out there. Which
Uh,
brings up a term you used, that AI models collapse.
yes.
What does that term mean?
It basically means it as the your audience is probably familiar with the law of large numbers. Well, they've probably heard the term, but they may not be um, familiar with the meaning of it. So, in very simple terms, the more data you get, the more results come back to center, right? Which
Okay.
makes sense because if you look at d- data distribution, it it's really based on averages and means and deviation and all. So the more you add, basically, the more entrenched you are in the median, the middle, the average. So these models, at least most forms of models, are really based on, to keep it simple, we'll call it proximity. How close are things together? So, like ChatGPT, when it does it looks at phrasings and grammar and all. What it's really doing is say which words are usually associated with each other. It's really not doing any thinking or looking through some rules. It's really saying how often are these things associated. So if it's very common for two words to always be associated, the more data you bring in, the more likely it is for them to be associated with each other in any output. Model collapse is when the model stops being distinct, where it's run to the point that everything has moved to the statistical average.
Okay.
So one of the ways, for the students listening in, one of the key indicators of analyzing for plagiarism is, as humans, there's certain expressions we like to use that become unique to who we are. But at the same time, when we read things, we want diversity. So when a human writes some stuff, they tend to not rigidly follow the same pattern over and over again. We instinctively start to sprinkle in things and not use the same word 5 times, things like that, where
Yep.
the models go the other way.
Oh.
So that tends to be an example. And if there are no hard and fast rules in this stuff yet, but it tends to go into the area of model collapse.
So then let me ask you this, Alex. What if there were people with nefarious intentions and they started to feed the models with BS?
That
And
happens all the time.
just total garbage.
That happens all the time. So there's actually a class of attacks that what you do is you intentionally give it bad data to influence the results.
Yep.
Um, now in practice, that tends to take a huge amount of data, and it takes a lot of orchestration and all. So for the most part, it's not very practical, which means that if you're going to do it, you have to have a huge investment and there has to be a real payoff, which means it would really be doing some real damage. So it's one of those things that isn't likely to happen to the average person, but when it does, it's going to be a big deal.
I think
Uh,
it will. I mean, Alex, think about this. Remember that GameStop, the stock, it
yeah,
went through the roof because a whole bunch of people on the internet decided they were going to drive the price up. And in fact, that one of the hedge funds almost went under for billions of dollars that was shorting the living daylights out of it. So if we
I
all,
mean, stop.
yeah, if one of us wants to perform that attack, it's difficult. But if 100 million or 50 million of us got together and said, you know what? We're going to feed ChatGPT a whole bunch of garbage. We're going
So
to make up.
this is where it happens, and there's been a number of instances like this. I'm going to keep company names out of it, but all these situations have made the news. One chatbot, because of, let's call it, crowdsourcing through social media,
Yeah.
was they were able to train a public chatbot to become a racist. There was another one that was advising people to break the law. There was another one.
Oh, that's
Um,
terrible.
yeah, let's. There was one that was convinced to be anti-Semitic. This happens. Unfortunately, this does happen. There's certain controls against it, around it. We're getting better with it. Um, I personally think the one that's encouraging users to break the law is kind of funny.
I
You know,
I do too, but I'm thinking, you know what? If I am a nation state and I want to influence your society's outcomes, this is a fantastic way
so what's
because
the
you,
biggest example of that? TikTok,
yeah,
right? Right? If you believe it or not, I mean, if you want to write it off as a conspiracy theory, or you believe all the reporting on it, no matter how you look at it, it's a perfect example for what we're talking about.
and there's the flaw with AI as it sits right now. And there's no delete function. So once it's part of the LLM, it's not like in the old days of Oracle databases or SQL databases where you could say drop table, goodbye,
Yeah,
right?
and there's other parts of that, right? A lot of the stuff, is, to your point, is driven by the data. And unfortunately, things like bias come out of the data,
Yes.
right? And we can have a whole show about what is bias and what is not bias and what does bias mean. The bottom line is you have to eliminate unwanted bias, because the reality is, you're trying to make a decision, you're biased, right? If I'm staffing a basketball team, I'm going to be biased towards tall players.
Makes sense.
right? If I'm trying to staff a all-female soccer club, I'm going to be biased towards women, right? So it's always about unwanted bias. So let's put that aside for a second. But we know that certain data is biased in a not good way or not appropriate way towards all sorts of groups. Sometimes it's geography, sometimes it's age, gender. We can march down the list. And unfortunately, we don't always know that that bias is embedded within those data sets.
So this then, I'm so glad you said this. So, um, when you look at all the cybersecurity OEMs that are embedding AI into their products, now you can't. I don't think you can buy anything that doesn't have AI. Heck,
Oh, I
maybe even
joke about this all the time.
yeah. I mean, even maybe the toilet seat's going to have AI in it. I don't know, but
Oh, I saw an AI enabled toilet.
that has to be from Japan. It has to be one of those crazy.
Look, that could be another podcast, but let me go to where you're going. So in October of 2022, when ChatGPT hit the market and suddenly everybody heard about AI that's been around for a very long time, they suddenly heard about it. I think all the product marketing folks and sales reps got a quota that they have to say AI within the first 30 seconds of any conversation, right? Every product on the planet started saying AI, right? Whether they had it or not. Now, the reality is the cybersecurity community has actually been using artificial intelligence for decades. For example, spam filters, one of the perfect examples, right? We see internet services providers like the big ones, the Verizons, the AT&Ts. We can walk down the list. Akamai, CrowdStrike, Palo Alto. I'm sorry if I didn't mention your name, but you're probably in there. They've all been using AI one way or another. The thing that we're seeing now that is a bit concerning and kind of where we started is that there's being claims made that can't be substantiated. There's also valid use cases that are not as easy as everybody thinks they are. Like the first AI use case I worked on in the early 90s was going through essentially log files to look for abnormal behavior and try to use predictive analytics.
That's still a totally legit use case.
We're still trying to figure it out. We're still trying to figure it out decades later. Um, we have more data now. We have more computing power. We compute differently. There's a lot of things that are helping it, but we just aren't there yet. All these product vendors will talk about AI. Most of them are serious, and all of them have really good stuff on the roadmap. It's one of those things for caveat emptor, buyer beware.
My thing was, on the bias, all their models have to be biased in some way because they were developed by
They are.
humans. And it, it's not going to be that hard to figure out the bias. It's time consuming, but it's not hard.
Well, there's another bias. There's a subtle bias in there that we don't know about. So if you look at our ability to detect incidents, we suck. And that's a technical term. Organizations typically only detect about a third of the incidents. Most incidents we actually find out by third parties like suppliers, law
Sure.
enforcement, regulators, right? All that. And then the remainder is like the malicious actor who tells us that they stole our data and want money for it. Unfortunately, we only detect one third, which means about 2/3 of incidents are not going detected. So one of the questions is, what's the inherent bias in our data and in our methods that are getting in the way of us detecting incidents?
That is, you nailed it.
That's the hard one.
And it's a real danger because the mentality in the industry is, what technical control should I put in place to alleviate the risk? Whether we like it or not, that nonsense continues, and it infuriates me, but I can't change it. They're not looking at the picture much more holistically. So if you say, I'm going to buy this AI-based, super advanced, whatever gadget it is, well, you might be lulled into a false sense of security
Yes.
that is going to create and wreak havoc. Not that dissimilar to what happened in the crow's nest on the Titanic. Those guys
Yes.
were drinking up there and they didn't have binoculars.
Yeah, bigger issue.
Well, hey, Alex, thanks for being on the show. Let's pick this up again. I know you got to run. Look forward to, just come back whenever you want.
All right, let's do it. I'm really enjoying these conversations, and we should talk about the Titanic a little more. Thanks again. I love being on the show. We need to pick up the conversation yet again.
Sounds good, Alex.
All right, thank you.
Take care.